just tying my shoelaces. You know, there's some movies that have been covered so many times and have so much of a rich backstory which you can read about that it almost makes me doing the review kind of pointless. But I already did Valley of the Dolls. So now it's time for Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Hi folks, I understand we're having some intangible dip and blue cheese, but we'll soon get this all sorted out. I bet it's Fidget. He's trying to interfere with the show again. Well, just excuse me, I have to go shave and get my beard back. Happy 40th episode to me! Yay. This is my happening and it freaks me out! Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is a film from 1988, and it's written and directed by Russ Meyer, and co-scripted, interestingly enough, by Roger Ebert, the film critic. The film is many things at once. It's a musical, it's a melodrama, but most of all, it's a parody of the film Valley of the Dolls, one that I already reviewed in a somewhat pointless outing, other than really just to bring this review to you now. The director, Russ Meyer, is a somewhat controversial figure from that era of late 60s, early 70s, if not sort of comical footnote, because he's mostly known for making films that are what we call in the biz which pretty much just means there's a lot of sex scenes for no rhyme or reason in films, and it's really just of a smutty sort of nature, and really only there to stimulate 14-year-old boys 40 years ago, and since, you know, now we have the internet, so we don't really need any more of those pornographic VHSs and magazines and whatnot. So it's kind of made all these films obsolete. However, this one seems to be much more of a film this time, and it doesn't look like it was just filmed over a weekend. But it was sexually explicit enough to receive an X rating at the time, which would be today's equivalent of an NC-17 rating, and it pretty much means that no one's going to distribute your movie. Although that doesn't always hurt a film, because Midnight Cowboy was a critical success as well. To this film's credit, it's in that first wave of late 60s, early 70s movies that were backed by a major studio that had this very fast-cutting editing style. It's something else! It's out of sight! It's a gas, baby!
Bentley!
It's really something other than else. And I guess the fact that we also have music from Strawberry Alarm Clock and, you know, drugs and sex and all else. This is one of the first movies, if not somewhat capturing a little bit of what was going on in the counterculture at that time and then showing it to a somewhat mass audience. This movie did pretty well. It was made for just under $1 million, and which was obviously much less even at that time, and it made much more than it cost to make. So the story. Well, instead of 3 pill-popping women going to New York City to try to make it in theater, it's 3 pill-poppers who are like, rockers baby, we're going to LA to make it in a theater. Oh! And then very quickly they get caught up in the whole lifestyle, and very soon things go wrong in a very comical fashion. So we get a bunch of rock songs, titties on display left and right, and also a lot of over-the-top acting. And this is probably the strongest within Z-Man. Oh, Z-Man! Z-Man! And the fictitious band within the movie, first called the Kelly Affair, which is then changed to the Carrie Nations, is actually somewhat good on its own, as well as legitimately an influence on some like girl bands and stuff that have come many years later. I think my personal favorite is In the Long Run. And yes, you guessed it, the pacing of the movie just moves along very quickly, especially the last third man or something of this movie. It is so wild and out there, and it just keeps getting so bad for all the characters, but so ridiculously silly and engrossing at the same time. And bless your heart if you've even made it that far into the movie. I guess what most interests me about this movie, besides the display of gigantic breasts, is the equation that brought it together. You know, it started out as it was going to be a sequel to Valley of the Dolls, and then it just veers off into this weird, super over-the-top, exaggerated parody land, and Roger Ebert's making sure that it's silly and a parody of all sorts of these films, but then it's also directed by a mesophiliac. And it's just fun to imagine, you know, when were they actually self-aware that it was getting super silly? Were they aware? Roger Ebert, like, looked back on it at the time, pretty sure that it was, but, you know, I don't know, it gets kind of silly, man. So overall, I'd I'd say it's a pretty gripping drama. Gripping my cock. Oh, that's 2! Though I can say I find a lot of the time watching the film I'm doing sort of like this, or sort of like, why, or... It's just a fun, bad movie that I guess isn't all that bad. It's just like, thanks guys for giving us this movie. It's just so nutty. And there's definitely technical and otherwise problems with it, like the main character, does she have a British accent? Does she not? Why do you keep changing it and bringing it back and not bringing it back? And also just sort of plot twists that come out of nowhere, again, towards the back end of the movie that just don't seem to really add up. But gosh darn it, I'm so glad that such a mess of a movie turned out this surprisingly coherent in the end, and, well, it really deserves to be on one of the top movies of that sort of late 60s, 70s, wacky 60s movies. This should be one of the first ones you probably should see. In the end, just be ready for some cringeworthy dialogue, you know, like immediately, "Don't bogart that joint, man." I myself had some nightmarish flashbacks to Myra Breckenridge. That was mine in Vietnam. But there it is, you know what it is, you know what it is going into it, so enjoy it for the camp value if nothing else, you know what I'm saying? It's definitely still tough to watch, but you know, before you know it, you're really into it, and it's just overall a very entertaining movie. Hey, did you notice I'm wearing the same sweater that I wore for the first review? Yeah, no one cares. I should really take that one down. I don't know. That movie just wasn't made for me. Anyway, I think this one's a little bit more up to speed. Well, I guess that's it, so have a good time, everyone, and, you know, if you haven't checked in the last hour or two, maybe it's time to take the dog out. Who knows? Just saying. Or maybe you left, like, the tea kettle on a little bit too long. Just make sure, you know, that's done. Or is there something in the oven, you know? I just want you and your family to be safe. Goodbye. Stay sweaty.